It's June 16th, and it's the 16th day of counting towards the first fruit of the wine. And really, the focus of everything going in these 50 days is our abiding relationship in Him, letting the Word abide in us. And as we look into Numbers chapter 13 tonight, we want to address probably the greatest truth that is post-Pentecost that any of us could even imagine. Lisa, why don't you read for us Numbers chapter 13, verses 1 and 2.
The Lord now said to Moses, send out men to explore the land of Canaan, the land I am giving to the Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
Send one leader from each of the 12. What the word? Ancestral
Ancestral.
ancestral tribes.
Very good. Now, this may not look like a whole lot, but there's a phrase that you see where it says at the beginning of verse 2. Now, the King James says, send thou. And your translation might read something a little bit easier to understand. Instead of using the King James language, it might say, send these men, or you need to send these individuals. But it's the phrase that is so important. The name of this Torah portion is Shalach. Shalach Leka. The word shalach, if I was spelling it for my notes, Shelach. Shalach is the word for send. Now, the picture that's being given is a picture that we're all familiar with, at least in title, but maybe not familiar with it in relationship to what it means. Out here in the front of the cottage, there's a garden that's growing, and every stem that comes up has branches that shoot off of those stems. Now, that process of a shoot, a branch being sent away from the main stem is called shalach, to send. And the purpose of it going away is so that it can recognize the importance of bearing fruit. It's going to flower, and then it's going to produce fruit. And when you've got a shalach, something being sent forth to bring forth fruit, you get the real meaning of shalach leka, which is what the Hebrew phrase is. Shalach is the word for an apostle. An apostle is somebody who is sent. They're sent as an identical replica of the main stem. If Yeshua is the vine and you and I are the branches, then we are supposed to be apostles. We are sent out away from the vine. And so this word shalach leka connects us back to the story of Abram and Abraham. At the beginning of Abram's journey, the Lord said, go out, leka, go out to find yourself. That's pretty important. Shalach leka is now, here we have these individuals who are in covenant relationship with God, and they are being sent out to go into the land. They're going to be Chamber of Commerce presidents. They're going to be on a tourist trip. They're not going on a reconnaissance mission. They're going to search out the land and say, hey, we just came by to see your land. That's what they're doing. Shalach leka is a phrase which means go out be sent out from your source and discover yourself. If I was going to give you a statement that's well worth writing down, maybe even putting a 3x5 card on your mirror, it would be this: the closer you get to your destiny, the deeper God reaches into your life to pull out the stuff that's really, really, really deep and hidden. I've experienced this in my own journey. When I know something's about to happen that's exciting, it almost seems like the temptation to do something off the wall rises even higher. And that's not really good. Shalach leka is send them out so they can leka, they can discover themselves. And this is what's going to end up happening. 12 tribes will have 12 individuals who are picked to go into the land to spy out the land. The two that we're most familiar with are Caleb and Joshua. Those are the two that are going to bring back a good report. In the process of them being sent out, we might ask ourselves the question, why? Why is God sending them out? I mean, hasn't God already told us about the land? If I go over to Deuteronomy chapter 8, where God clearly describes the land in this most incredible way, he says, picking up here, and this is something that as I was finishing up an amazing dinner that Joseph cooked this evening, and my belly was incredibly full, I walked out the door giving God glory, praise for him filling my belly. I don't want to ever forget the things that God has done. The scripture tells us here in chapter 8, verse 11, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God in not keeping his commandments and his judgments and his statutes, which I command you this day. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and you have built goodly houses and dwelt therein, when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, and pay close attention to that, because he's telling you something. When you go into the land, and everything that you have is going to be creature comforts. It's going to be multiplication, 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 multiplication. Don't forget. Remember. So he says, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, and your heart is lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, wherein fiery serpents, scorpions, drought where there was no water, who brought you forth water out of the rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers knew not, that he might humble you, and that he might prove you and do good at the latter end. And you will say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me this wealth. But you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he that gives you power to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant which he sware to your fathers, as it is this day. And it shall be, if you do forget the Lord your God, and walk after other gods, and serve them, and worship them, I promise you, I'm testifying against you this day, that you will perish. As the nations which the Lord destroys before your face, so shall you perish, because you would not be obedient unto the voice of the Lord your God. Now here we have a summary of Yahweh taking the children of Israel through the wilderness, feeding them with bread, drinking the water, overcoming the serpents, the scorpions, everything in the wilderness that was devastating, to take them to a land that was promised. Now go back to chapter 1. In chapter 1 of the book of Deuteronomy, what we have here is we've got when this is a summary of the spies. I'm going to come around full circle here in just a second. I wanted to remind you that God's provided for them all throughout the wilderness to test them, to prove them, to see if they would walk in his ways or not. He's going to take them to a land that flows with milk and honey. Picking up the story here in chapter 1, verse 26. He says, notwithstanding, you would not go up, but you rebelled against the commandment of the Lord your God. God said, okay, boys and girls, it's time to go up. And they rebelled. You murmured in your tents, and this is what you said. Pay close attention to this because this makes no sense. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is at the depth of why they didn't go finish their faith. This is at the depth of what is hiding inside of most likely every single one of us that are struggling in areas. We think, according to verse 27, they say, because the Lord hated us, he's brought us forth out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. And whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying the people is great and taller than we. The cities are great, walled up to the heavens. And moreover, we've seen the sons of the Anakims. And you go, my stars, how could they ever dream in their mind that God hates them? And how could that ever come up in my mind that I hate God and that God hates me? How could I ever say that? When things don't go the way that I want them to go, I act as my own God, and the God who I know is in control of everything, who doesn't give me what I want, I think that he's hating me. And that's what they end up saying. If you look at verse 32, in this wilderness time, it was in this thing you did not believe the Lord your God. Wow, that's crazy. They didn't believe the Lord their God. Go back to the book of Exodus and go back to Exodus chapter 17. In Exodus chapter 17, verse 7, this is at the root of why they think God hates them. Yes, they've experienced the plagues, the 10 plagues. They've experienced the deliverance from Egypt. They've experienced the pillar of cloud, their clothes not wearing out, their shoes not wearing out. They've experienced going through the sea. They've experienced their enemies being washed up on the shore. They've experienced the song of Moses. They've experienced the wells of Miriam. They've experienced the wells of Marah. They experienced the wells at Elim. They have fed on the manna, angels' food that comes from heaven. They have drank from the rock that followed them. They've come to Sinai. They've had God's voice specifically speak to them. They have all their diseases wiped out. They have no sickness, nothing. God has provided for them over and over and over again. You say, how could they say that God hates them? The same reason that we do. Exodus chapter 17, verse 7. And he called the name of the place Massah and Meribah, the place of quarreling and strife. Arguing and strife. Boy, how often do I argue with God? Instead of recognizing not only does he know what's best for me, but he's the only source of blessing. And the only source of blessing can come through my obedience. So when difficult times come my way, the question is, how do I respond? How do I respond to those? Do I quarrel? Do I argue? Do I become contentious towards God? He goes on to say, because of the chiding of the children of Israel, and because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? I was mowing yards today, and as I was mowing them, a thought was coming through my mind. I mean, as I was pushing the lawnmower back and forth and back and forth, a continuous thought was going through my mind. I was asking myself the question, I was saying, why don't people keep the commandments of God? Number one, they're not too difficult. Number two, it's the only way that God's going to bless you. In fact, he's told us if you want to be blessed, keep him. And he would never tell us to do something that we couldn't do just to frustrate us, to say that that's the reason why I need Jesus, is because I can't keep the commandments. No, all throughout the Torah and all throughout the prophets, they could easily, and every time they were keeping the commandments, from Shabbat to eating clean to bringing their offerings to their prayer times to everything, they were blessed beyond compare. Their enemies were dispersed. It was when they were in rebellion that the enemies attacked and things started happening and they went into captivity. I asked myself the question over and over again. I said, why do we not keep the commandments of God? And because they're doable. And the first answer that I gave to myself was because we don't know God. I got to hear a sermon this weekend out of 1 John chapter 2. If you say that you know me, you will keep my commandments. 1 John chapter 2, verse 3. If you say that you know me, God speaking, you'll keep my commandments. From Sabbath to eating clean, to keeping the Moedim, to the way you love your spouse, to the way you do business, to the way you love your neighbor, and all the other things that go along with it. If you say you know me, it's because you're doing my commandments, and my commandments are the character of who I am. So as I'm pushing the lawnmower back and forth, I'm asking myself the question, why aren't people keeping the commandments of God? And the answer was because we don't know the goodness of God. We really don't know the goodness of God. We're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, and might. The question is that many do not even know who he is. Oh yeah, we know his name, God. We know his name, Lord. We know his name, all the different titles for him, but do we know him? And I think it's because we don't know him. We don't know that he's merciful. We don't know that he's full of grace. We don't know that he's kind. We don't know that he's forgiving. We don't know that he's long-suffering. We never really stop to think about all that he is. So I'm pushing the lawnmower back and forth, thinking of these thoughts. And I'm just going through all these qualities and characteristics. And I was asking myself the question, why don't people keep the commandments of God? And why does evangelical Christianity consider his commandments to be burdensome? Because they don't know God. They really don't know him. They don't know his qualities. They don't know his character. They don't know that he's there for them. They just don't know. I highlighted a verse today in my own personal study in the book of 1 Samuel. And as I was looking at this verse, actually it's 2 Samuel chapter 14, verses 13 and 14. And I've been meditating on this verse all day long. These two verses. And the woman said, Wherefore then have you thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king does speak this thing as one which is faulty, and that the king does not fetch home again his banished. For we must needs die, and are as water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Neither does God respect any persons, yet does he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him. And I thought to myself, as I was pushing that lawnmower back and forth, I go, what do I know about God? Well, 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 14 says to us specifically, he doesn't just banish you. That's how much he loves you. Yes, if I'm worthy of him pushing me away or sending me off into captivity, okay, that's part of his qualities and essence. But if I know that his essence is love, and if I know he's merciful, and I know he's kind, and I know he's generous, and I know he's forgiving, and I know he's long-suffering, and I know he's truthful, I know he's righteous, I know all the 13 attributes of him found in Exodus chapter 34. And I know that he's a jealous God from Exodus chapter 20. And I know he's not a respecter of persons. And I know he gives us exactly what we have coming to us. What we sow is what we reap. If I could fall in love with a God like that, who doesn't expel me forever, who will draw me back, who give me an opportunity to pick myself up, who give me an opportunity to be converted. That's a word which just means to turn around. It's like repentance. A God who would allow me to become like a little child. A God who would allow me to be able to, as I'm moving forward in my journey, to recognize that there's flaws on the inside of me, and those flaws become surfaced and now gives me an opportunity to work on them. If I could know him and I could love him for who he is, I would gladly keep his commandments. Because then I know when keeping his commandments, there's going to be blessings because his presence is there. He's carrying the yoke with me. That's the root word of mitzvah. To join, zav. To join. He joins me. That's why Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn of me. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. It's still a burden, but it's light because you're teaming up with him. You're joining up to him. You're zav. You're zav within the mitzvah. Now, if I know that about God, then in Exodus chapter 17, where the children of Israel are murmuring and they're complaining and they're striving and they're being contentious and they're asking the question, is the Lord among us or not? They knew that he was a miracle worker. They knew that he was able to do great things. I mean, he's feeding 2 million people every day. He's giving water for 2 million people every day. Could you imagine if the Army Corps of Engineers tried to create a place for 2 million people and it had to be mobile and had to move through the wilderness for a period of 40 years? Be an impossible task. God does that. When I begin to understand how much God really wants to manifest who he is, and I know those qualities of who he is, I'll gladly keep the commandments. Going back to Numbers chapter 13. Why does Moses shalach leka? Well, if I go back to Deuteronomy, and I go to Deuteronomy chapter 1 again, and I look at Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 22, notice what he says. He says, and you came near to me, every one of you, and said, we will send men before us, And they shall search us out the land and bring us word again by the way that we must go up into the cities, into what cities we shall come. And so then Moses said, okay, I can't see anything wrong with that. When you read the book of Numbers, it sounds like God sent them. But what God did was God sent them in relationship to their own desire. They said, you know what, Lord, you've told us it's a land flowing with milk and honey. You told us that it's a land of great wealth. You told us that there's vineyards. You told us there's all kinds of things in that land. You gave it the promise to Abraham. You've proved yourself out here to us, but we still want to send spies in. And you know what's amazing about God? Whenever my fear rises up and my lack of faith in him, he lets me experience the fear and the lack of faith because that's the kind of God he is. If I know that about him, then I don't want to be afraid. If I know that about him, I do want to be obedient. If I know that about him. I think one of the challenges that just about everybody faces, we don't know him very well. We don't know him very well. And that's a big reason why we don't keep his commandments, because we think, well, you know what? I'll just be a good moral person. Okay, I'll hold the door for somebody. Okay, I'll serve somebody like this. And we think that's righteous living. Oh, that is part of righteous living, but there's much, much more to it. And there's much more in regards to the blessings that end up coming. And so these individuals, they make up their mind that they're going to send spies in to go search out the land. Why? Because they think God hates them. How often we forget to count our blessings. There's a children's song that says, count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done. When was the last time you counted your blessings? I mean, like really counted your blessings. Like, I'm in a wonderful cottage. I have a fan over my head. I have lights around me. I'm sitting in a comfortable chair. It's nicely decorated. It's cozy. It's homey. I've got a belly that's full, a body that's relatively healthy. I've got a mind that thinks that God's given to me. All of these types of things I've got, and they're blessings. I have breath in my lungs. I have the ability to think, to be able to share, to be able to love, to be able to work, to be able to. Have you ever just stopped to really count your blessings? Naming them one by one. And you say, well, Alan, that would take all day. Yeah. And then you would start to recognize how good God has been to you. And then you recognize his qualities. And then you wouldn't be afraid of what men can do to you. Then you wouldn't be afraid of what people say. Then you wouldn't be afraid of exploring and sharing your faith openly. And you would gladly keep his commandments. And when he says, I've given you the promised land, go up and take it, you just go up and take it. But if you have unresolved issues inside of you, I mean unresolved, obviously, they think that God hates them. That's crazy. But I'll bet you dollars to donuts for every one of us. There's been times where we think, God hates me. You know, when I recognize that the challenges that are coming into my life are from the hand of God, then I don't look at them as judgment. I look at them as discipline because he sees better things inside of me. If I've got stuff happening in my life and it makes me angry at God, he doesn't treat that action towards me as discipline. He treats it as judgment. My mindset towards him, understanding that he took me into the wilderness, he's got us in the wilderness. Why? He's got us in the wilderness for one reason, to test us, to prove us, to see if there's any wicked ways in us. And this is what this Torah portion is about. And tonight, I just wanted to give you something to think about. The question that I want you to think about is, what's hindering you from moving forward in your relationship with Yahweh? What is your unresolved issue? What is your mindset towards God? That He's not giving you what you think He should give to you. Chances are we all have unresolved issues. And as I was pushing the lawnmower today, I kept searching and kept asking, show me the unresolved issues. Show me the reasons why at times I feel like you hate me because I'm not getting what I want when I clearly don't trust you. And I wonder, do you really care about these parts of my life? And when I stop to think about even a prayer that we do quite frequently at the clinic, Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. You know, when I stop to think and I go, well, why don't I have my millions of dollars? God, you must hate me. Nope. He's just checking to see if I've got any unresolved issues on the inside. Do I have a misappropriated mindset towards God? Have I forgotten who He is? What His qualities are? What His character is? It's when I forget who He is. That's when I usually, instead of being shalach leka and being an apostle carrying the same message as the main stem, I go off on my own and I find myself attaching to the things of this world. Which 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 through 17 tells us, don't do it. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. See that? Why would I love the things of the world? Because the love of the Father is not in me. It's unresolved. And the reason why the love of the Father, it's not the Father's love for me, it's my love of the Father is not in me. The love of the Father is not in me. I've stopped taking into consideration who He is. And I'm looking at my circumstances and my situations, saying, obviously, God doesn't care. Is the Lord really among us or what? That's the beginning of unresolved issues. And Lord willing, as we head into this week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Shabbat, hopefully we won't have any unresolved issues that we don't take care of. Instead of questioning God, let's remember the source from which those commands come. And let's do those and experience the blessing rather than living in fear and in the reality of, well, I think He hates me. I think He brought me out of Egypt just to kill me out here. That's silly. If that was the case, He wouldn't have been providing the bread and the water and everything that we needed, the health, the clothing, the cloud, the shoes not wearing out, the people not being sick. If that's really what His purpose, He would have had us drowned in the sea instead of coming out on the other side. He doesn't want to kill you. As 2 Samuel 14:14 says, if I've strayed off, He wants to bring me back. And that's an important truth. And Yahweh willing, that's how we'll live this life. As you take the time to read through Numbers chapter 13, Numbers chapter 14 and 15, you're going to ask yourself the question, as God moves me closer towards my destiny, my unresolved issues are going to rise to the surface. And when they rise to the surface, am I going to live in fear and am I going to blame God? Or am I going to recognize my fear and yield them to God and trust Him for the outcome? That's what I need more than anything else. That's how I'm praying for you. And hopefully that's how you be praying for me. Wish you a great week. I'll end the call and open it up for any comments or questions.